The Trump administration now says they will handpick which media outlets will be allowed in the White House press pool, a move that breaks with decades of precedent. Just this morning, the Associated Press was denied access to the press pool at Mar-a-Lago, where reporters from conservative outlets, Real America's Voice and The Daily Wire, are taking their place. In a new piece on MSNBC.com, our own Simone writes, quote, "The people in power do not get to decide who writes about them or what they write. That only happens in dictatorships and autocracies." With us now, the New York Times chief White House correspondent, Peter Baker.
Peter, welcome.
You know, can I just say, when I worked at the White House, I used to battle with a lot of reporters, Peter Baker included, okay? There were many times where, I do wish that I could have picked who was traveling with us that day. Our last trip to France before I left the White House is one of those. There were many times where, the team would go through great pains to get the reporters all these things, and then you see the story and it's like, it's not, I don't love it all. I don't hate it all. Sometimes you hate it. But that is the beauty of America. My job as the press person is to work with you all to get you as much information as possible to help, frame up the story, if you will. Yeah. But it is the reporter's jobs to take what I'm saying, but also get the context and then put it out there for the American people. What is happening with this White House is not only disturbing, it is catastrophic because what you all are the conduit. You were writing the first draft of history. And what happens when the first draft is heavily edited and redacted?
Well, look, it is an adversarial relationship, as it's supposed to be, between the press and the people in power, whether it's Democrat or Republican. It's not unique to Trump. But hopefully it's also a professional relationship. They can be both things. But it's not up to people in power, or at least hasn't been under Democrats or Republicans going back as long as any of us have been alive, in which a president picked who was in that press pool. Now, a lot of viewers may say, who cares? What's that mean? Well, what it means is you're going to get questions more and more from people like, tell us, sir, about your moral courage. Right. Tell us, sir, about your great poll results, as opposed to, challenging questions, which is what a reporter is supposed to do in that circumstance. Now, some of the mainstream press is still in that press pool, but what he has done by kicking out the Associated Press explicitly and overtly, because of the words that they have written, because of their coverage, is he's put them all on notice, all of us on notice, that if you write something I don't like, I can get rid of you.
And that is the point. Yeah. If you write something I don't like, I will get rid of you. And that has the chilling effect on not just the press, but you see that then ripple out to other institutions and individuals who are watching what's happened, because you are a representation of the freedom that is embodied in our Constitution. What you do is the only job that's actually referenced in the Constitution, right? Yeah. So it signals the importance. You wrote, I thought you've written so many powerful pieces in the last few weeks, but last Wednesday you wrote, "America is no Russia. The history there is so fraught and complicated. Certainly many Russian journalists would still rather live in Washington these days than Moscow, confident that America's tradition of free press and democratic ideals remains far stronger than what exists back home. But in decades of reporting in Washington under Republicans and Democrats, it has never quite felt like this."
Yeah. So I was based in Moscow for 4 years, the early 4 years of Vladimir Putin's term with my wife, Susan Glasser, for the Washington Post. And what we saw in that 4 years is feeling very familiar to us now in Washington. The crackdown on independent press, the taming of the oligarchs is what they call them there. We can call them tycoons or billionaire tech bros or whatever we want to call them here. Piece by piece, the neutralizing of alternative centers of power or influence in society. Now, it got a lot worse after we left, but that chill that we were feeling in those early 4 years of Putin's time there, we're having flashbacks. We're feeling that here now. And it's a slippery slope that heads in a very bad direction. Now, as I said, America's not Russia. We shouldn't overstate this comparison. But the fear factor is what feels most striking to me. When we got to Russia, people were pretty open about talking with us. By the time we left, people who talked to us freely were no longer talking to us, no longer returning our calls. And I'm feeling that here in Washington. People who used to speak out about Trump, Democrats as well as never Trump Republicans, don't want to be quoted anymore. Please don't use my name. I can't go on television. I don't know if you find that getting guests, but I find trying to get people in my stories, they don't want to have their names out there because they're afraid of what could happen.
It was the same conversation we were just having with Melanie Stansbury about the fact that a lot of her Republican colleagues are willing to whisper into her ear about how upset they are and how they're phone banking the White House. They're not so brave as to say that out in public. Listen, I want to acknowledge some of the discomfort here, Peter, of the fact that as journalists, part of the deal is never making yourself a part of the story. And this now becomes an inevitability that you have a press, a free press that is in direct is part of the story now. The president has made the press a part of the story. And so my question to you is, who then the press appeals to? We've seen appeals to courts. For example, on Monday, you had a judge rejecting the AP's access to the White House, urging the government to reconsider. Judge McFadden said the AP had not proven harm requiring an immediate restraining order, but he cautioned the White House that the law wasn't on its side in barring AP over continuing to refer to the Gulf of Mexico, not simply the Gulf of America, as Trump decreed in an executive order. Just want to note that judge was a judge appointed by Donald Trump in 2017. Who do you appeal to? Who comes to the aid of the press here?
Yeah, basically nobody. Look, the Associated Press lawsuit will continue. This is just about the temporary restraining order. So we're not done with that. We'll see where that goes. And we have conversations among ourselves about what kinds of responses we as a press should take. But you're right. We don't like to be the story. We don't want to be the story. It's not our job to be the story. It's our job to cover it. And I think that Trump enjoys making us the villain or the enemy or whatever he calls us, the enemies of the people, fake news, all those pejorative terms, in order to discredit us. He once said that to Leslie Stahl. I always remember this. Leslie Stahl asked him once, off camera, unfortunately, why do you always attack reporters in the media? And he said, in order to discredit you, so that when you write things I don't like, people won't believe you. And he even said once in a speech in his first term, I remember this very vividly, he said, don't trust anybody but me. Right? You know who also says that? Vladimir Putin says that. And again, you don't want to take these comparisons too far, but it's a striking sense of control. And to that point, last point, on the Associated Press, remember what you just pointed out, what he is objecting to. They use the phrase Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of America. Well, most of the world still uses Gulf of Mexico, and the AP is an international organization. But you know who also tries to dictate what language that reporters use? Again, Vladimir Putin. You're not allowed to call the war in Ukraine a war. You have to call it a special military operation. When people in power get to dictate to the press what words they use, what terms they use, much less what they actually write about them, that's a whole pernicious system.
We have been talking about the lack of Republicans who are willing to, stand up to the president, and even some Democrats. Right now, there's reporting from Axios that Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, wants Democrats to attend and bring their guests who have been affected by DOJ, and there are others who are saying, no, we should not be there. So you've got that happening within the Democratic Party apparatus. You've got Republican members of Congress who are just ceding their constitutional authority as a co-equal branch of government while Elon Musk raids the federal government. They're calling up the White House saying, please don't do this quietly, but again, not putting their name on the record. But when it comes to the reporters, I was struck by, this is the pool report where the press sends out what is happening. And this was this morning as we gathered. Pool once again saw our Associated Press colleagues turned away from joining the pool by White House staffer. In their stead, reporters from Real America's Voice and the Daily Wire are in the pool as they have been since Friday. Much like how if Republicans would like to, assert their co-equal branch of their authority, they need to actually stand up and say something. What is going on with all of the White House reporters? Why are your colleagues being barred?
Yeah.
Why is everybody on the bus?
Yeah, I understand. Look, it's a good question. And we're having a debate about this right now. All of us are having this debate among ourselves. We're texting and calling and having meetings and so forth. And it's not an easy question because, first of all, if you take some sort of action like a boycott, you have to do it collectively. It doesn't work to have one or two organizations do it. And you know that getting all press people to do the same thing is like herding cats, right?
Herding cats is easier.
Herding cats is easier. We are not built genetically to work together. We're competitive by nature. And so that's the first thing. Second thing, I think, on the one hand, I think, yes, why should we go in there when our colleagues are being barred? That is almost accepting this as if that was acceptable, and it's not. But to Alicia's point, we don't want to be the story. So is it just performative if we all say walk out one day? Or are we playing into his hands because he wants us to? So he fills even more seats with people who won't ask him tough questions. And shouldn't there at least be an effort to get at least somebody in that pool who is still asking him tough questions rather than people who are not? So I can play at both sides on that debate. I have my position in our internal conversations that I won't go into, but it's kind of a tough choice.
I know we're going. I just want to say to that last point. I think, Peter, the journalists will find themselves to be freed up. If Donald Trump wants to stack the press pool with sycophantic reporters like the idiot who asked, Zelensky about wearing a suit, let him do that, because then you're freed up to report without those restrictions. You can then call the balls and strikes the way they're playing out, whether you're in the room or not. And
keep in mind, we do that even while we're in the pool.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And being in the pool is not the best way to be a White House reporter anyway.
Exactly.
But the question is, does he get pushed on things he doesn't want to be pushed on?
Right.
Well, you know what? I think Peter Baker has taken a hard line. He's out here reporting the stories, doing the work. So is Susan Glasser and others. I just encourage some of the other White House reporters, just pretend this is the Biden administration. Treat them how you're treating Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and the press people that work for them, okay? Peter Baker, thank you.